You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality and where Leibowitz meets Valliant. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I have to give the disclaimer, although I am the vice chairman of the American Capitalist Party, the show is in no way affiliated with the American Capitalist Party, nor do our views necessarily express the views of that party. As you can see, folks, I am woefully underdressed here. I'm still in my pajamas. I've had an absolutely chaotic morning. Due to my other job, a lot of stuff came in at the end when I was getting ready to shower, so it didn't work out. I hope you'll forgive me. Just focus on Jim, and you won't see anything you don't want to see.
Well, I'm so formally,
Jim in all his glory.
Well, yeah, I'm formally dressed in white tie and tails, as you can
Yeah,
obviously.
you look marvelous. So
it's not really for the eye candy that people tune in. I have a feeling you've indicated.
What are you kidding me? I've been deceived. My mom lied to me.
My mom lied to me. My mom said I was the best looking boy in the whole world.
She did, Jim. But also my mother, till she died, no matter how much I told her I was guilty of the crimes I was in prison with, insisted I was innocent. So she said, no, I just don't think you do that.
Well, my experience as a prosecutor, that is the case in 90% of the mothers out there. When there's DNA, fingerprints, and a taped confession that my little boy could never have done that. Are you kidding?
No, not the little boy.
Yes.
And if he did, he had a good reason, right?
And if he did, he must have been right. Exactly.
It must have been a good reason. All right, so this is questions. We got open questions. And first, I see that my mind's all over the freaking place.
Yes.
The first thing you got to do is you got to share the episode. Remember to go to YouTube and share it. And remember to go to the comments to share it from there as well. I feel like there's something else I wanted to say, but now I cannot remember it. That really sucks. Oh, I had a debate yesterday, Jim. And the issue was I called Trump an authoritarian. So we talked. The debate was the proposition Trump is an authoritarian. I took the affirmative. The other guy took the negative. Now, I've had, I think, about 5 of these debates now about Donald Trump. And one fake debate. The one fake debate I had is where you took the position of a Trump supporter, which you actually are not. Interestingly, the hardest debate I've ever had regarding Donald Trump was with the one guy who doesn't even support Donald Trump. So there you have it. I don't know.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think it does take, but to do a debate properly, you have to appreciate the other side. And if you don't, you're not going to do a very good job in debating it. You know, what we were saying about Daniel Dennett's rules of discourse, that's one area where I agree with him. Until and unless you can state your opponent's position in such a way that he will say, I wish I'd put it that way, you really aren't qualified to take him on. You have to understand their position thoroughly from their perspective. Then and only then can you begin to debate an issue.
When I was having my friend Carlos, when he first started reading philosophy and economics, and he thought that he was, really up there, I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take the opposite position and we're going to debate and see how, and it taught him, but it also taught me because I had to actually come up with the best arguments for the other side. But we've got a question here, Jim. This is from the website, and I hope I don't butcher this name. It is Janar. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I am starting a new job position. I'm excited, but at the same time, a bit scared. Do I fit in? Am I capable of doing the things that are asked of me? What if I'm not good enough, etc.? How do you guys deal with imposter syndrome? I've personally found that I was most anxious before getting to know the team and the tasks. So I guess there is a very strong connection between anxiety and uncertainty. Yes. Also seems like this topic is closely related to self-esteem, one of the cardinal values of objectivism. E.g., even though you might be anxious about something new happening in your life, you can always fall back and lean on your self-esteem to overcome any obstacles. So I'll just say this.
Excuse me.
I generally don't suffer from imposter syndrome. If anything, I'm arrogant. I was just telling Jim and Persephone off the air, I get the sense that I'm not getting everything I deserve. So I might not be the best person for this, but I will say this. It makes perfect. I think we need to differentiate, right, between imposter syndrome and realistic anxiety. Because I think some anxiety is good going into a new position where you're unfamiliar with what you're entering into. You don't know what the tasks are going to be. And I think that if you harness that anxiety, it can actually keep you sharp, right? Because you don't want to go in and think, I just got it, I can do everything. You want to go in it with a sense of, okay, I don't know everything about this, because you don't. It's a new job, and it makes sense to have that anxiety. But if you were given the job, somebody thought you were worth it, right? You were worth hiring. And just by applying to the job, somewhere inside you believe that you're worth it. So I don't think it's actually imposter syndrome. I think from what the post says, and granted it's a short question, but I think that this is just healthy anxiety. It's good to have it going into things. And there's actually been studies related to stress that a decent amount of stress can actually lead to better performance, unless the stress is overwhelming you. Then it leads to diminished importance. So I think you just go, you do your absolute best, and don't worry about it. I think you can handle it. I don't even know you, but I know they hired you, and I know you went in for it. So that's my take on it. Jim, how about you?
Man, have I been in situations where I had that. I've never done this before. What's it going to be? Oh, Jesus, am I going to mess up? I've had that kind of anxiety. Try doing a jury trial for the first time as a lawyer, as a litigator. And there you are you've been trained in the rules of evidence and procedure. You've done your very best to automatize all of these rules with all of this training, but to actually implement them in court for the first time, man, my palms were sweating. I was having little minor anxiety attacks. But I think that those anxiety attacks were, as you say, healthy anxiety. I'd never done it before. And part of it, and it is uncertainty. You know what anxiety is? Anxiety is filling in the future with a negative that hasn't yet occurred.
Nice. I like
that. And
that.
so the way I approached it is, well, it could go really bad. It could go really good. I don't know. I'm going to give myself the benefit of the doubt and give it a whirl. Do the best I can. I'm not going to be pretentious. I'm not going to put on some confidence that I don't, some pretense. That's the imposter syndrome. I'm not going to put on something I don't know. If I don't know, and this is one of the great tricks I also learned. If I don't know, I don't know. If something new comes up, my gosh, okay, we're discovering it here, because sometimes in court, things will happen. Don't get, a lot of times, prosecutors or trial attorneys, something new will explode in court and they'll freak out. And, the first time that happened to me, I was like, okay, obviously we have to go with it. We have to roll with it, deal with it as it happens. And there will be surprises. Know beforehand. There's going to be things you haven't anticipated. But guess what? It's like riding a bike. The first time you do it, there's going to be anxiety. Am I going to tip over? Am I going to scrape my knee, bang my head? But I'm going to give it a shot. And yeah, you have to rely on the fact that it is unknown, and try not to fill in that unknown with something negative before it happens. That would be my best advice. You study, be prepared. There's nothing, if part of the anxiety is I didn't do my homework, well, go do your goddamn homework. If part of the anxiety is I did all the homework I can, but this is something wholly new that I've never done before, and I'm not going to know until I've done it a couple of times at all, my bearings. Those are some of the most exciting feelings, actually, when you're like a cliff diver at Acapulco and you're right up against the cliff and you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, I'm going to have to jump. That feeling of jumping into the abyss is actually a very thrilling and exciting one. And if you can do that a couple of times in your life, boy, that next time gets easier and easier and easier to take on a challenge you've never taken on before or done before. But know that you are worth it. You're worth that risk. You're worth that chance. Your life depends on it. And that's what really gets you through. And know that what it is an unknown. Don't start filling in the worst possible scenario. Okay, I trip and I fall and my pants fall down and everyone's laughing at me and whatever the
Oh, that drives me
anxiety.
nuts, Jim. That my girlfriend has that tendency. So
Yeah.
when we're going somewhere, she's like, "Well, what if this? What when we were going to Washington D.C.? She's like, "Well, what if we crash in the garage?" I'm like, "Listen, I am not going to sit here and argue about a potential automobile crash in a garage somewhere." Here's the thing, right? I'm noticing we have nothing in the private chat here, and I'm watching Persephone, and she's very distracted. I think it's because of what I'm wearing. She's very distracted by me right now, and it's a problem. Persephone, please focus. Just look straight ahead. You don't have to focus on me. Don't worry about it.
Your state of undress is your state of undress is causing a
it's causing havoc. It's causing havoc on the production of the show. Yes. Now, Jim, I know you, and you you had a quasi-religious upbringing, right?
I did,
and that is hard to get rid of. And it's, it affects you even, when you do your best to purge it. So you, in my experience, are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Underconfident. Relative to your abilities and your personality, you tend to be humble. So I don't know if that translates into the type of imposter stuff, because you do so wonderfully at, everything that you do. So you really do. I mean, but do you ever experience, say, too much anxiety?
Yeah, sometimes I do. There's no doubt about it. And so what I'll do is I'll try and recognize what I just said. I don't know what I don't know, and I'm not going to fill in the unknown with a negative beforehand. I'll try and cognitively reassure myself that way, but also physically try and bring my body down. I'll do the marine breathing square, count so many breaths in, hold, count so many breaths out, hold for certain, and literally breathing exercises. Now, this is going to sound like I'm maybe hippy dippy, but meditation is what I'm talking about. There are physical ways of calming yourself down. Yeah, if anything, I am a low self-esteem kind of guy. I needed to recreate and build from scratch a real self-esteem. Christianity had done a number on my self-esteem. Oh, I had older siblings too. And believe me, having older siblings will do a number to your self-esteem. But yeah, if anything, I'm not a neurotic, but if anything, I'm over on the, I need to help constantly be bolstering my own self-esteem. That is definitely the side I'm on. And if I have to meditate and do a breathing exercise to control my breathing and anxiety, I will do it. If I have to cognitively reassure myself that my anxiety is filling in an unknown with a negative, I will repeatedly do that to myself. And then I'll go back and guess what? That homework I was talking about, let the preparation take over your consciousness. That is to say, I'm trying to make frosty and at my fingertips everything that I know and that I'll need for this, whatever the performance is that I need to do. The best thing I can do.
Now, obviously, in Objectivism, Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff have written that people will try to reverse cause and effect, right? That and I'm reminded, there's a line in the book As a Man Thinketh, and it says, people attract what they are, not what they want. And there's another one, people are eager to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound. But nevertheless, people will seek out significant others in an attempt to get a self-esteem they don't have, rather than using their self-esteem to attract the right partner. Now, that said, I'm just curious. You have an amazing wife who absolutely adores you. I mean, she thinks you walk on water, and doesn't hesitate to tell you. Right. Now, if you've already have sort of a nascent self-esteem that's growing, can that help? Now, I'm not saying you get your self-esteem from it, but is it, because I think it is. When people praise me, right, especially if I think I'm good at something, and I'll give you a for instance, for 25 years I was in prison reading books, but we weren't taking tests. So Brent and I are talking to each other about them, but we have no outside verification that our interpretations are correct. Now, since I've been out, I've had the opportunity to interview experts, on Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, Ayn Rand, Leonard Peikoff, and I've been vindicated every single time as knowing what I'm talking about. That felt good because it reinforced, okay, I was confident And now I see that my confidence was justified. And when I've relayed this to Brent on the telephone, he gets the same sense. It's not that we're getting self-esteem from it, but I think it is a self-esteem boost or a reinforcer. What's your thoughts on this?
It depends on the source. Look, if it's just anybody who can do this, or if it's just being popular in a crowd or a party or whatever the social group is, then I would look into it. Or if it's just appeasing, appearances in general. No, the reason why Holly's praise and my wife, I do have an amazing wife. The reason why it works is that she's also not shy about criticizing me. You screwed up. She's honest. She said, oh, no, I wouldn't have done it. Oh, well, you know what you could have done over there? So while she does worship the ground I walk on, and she has this magical ability, I love her so, she has this magical ability to make me, of all people, feel like the most handsome guy in the world. So when it comes to...
There you go. See what you just said?
What?
See what you just said right there. That's what I'm talking about. She said she makes me, of all people. You see what I mean?
That's
I don't like right now. I'm getting I'm watching the way that Persephone is looking at me in the chat, and it's boosting my self-esteem.
She boosts my self-esteem that way because I'm aware of my low self-esteem, because I am sort of self-conscious of that, me of all people part, because I can't see myself that way. And there's certain things you can't, no matter how, Ayn Rand. Leonard Peikoff tells me this all the time, tells the stories of this all the time. Ayn Rand could never see herself the way her fans saw herself. She could never, someone said, well, my God, this is a revolution in philosophy, in ethics or epistemology, and they would go on praising. I can't think of myself in terms of being a genius of the ages. I'm just honest. It's not that I'm some brilliant person. Or there was this dedication in a book she read in Russia, to beautiful me or something was the dedication. Book the author dedicated the book to herself, and I said I could never look at myself that way. Now, but on the other hand, since there's an angle that I can't appreciate that Holly has on me, I will defer to that. On the other hand, when it comes to all that other stuff, my virtue, my moral virtue, my character, my personality, I think that she loves me for good reason. So I have enough self-esteem in that department to get the feedback and the encouragement. But it's true for you and anyone else in my life who criticizes me. If they're criticizing me from a place of shared values, you have a point, you were kind of right there. Suddenly now your praise will also take on a whole new dimension for me. You're honest with me about these other things. You bust my balls on this and that other. So when you just said, as before you said, you gave me great praise. That praise fills me with a warm fuzzy in a way that no one else's praise could do, because guess what? You were perfectly willing to criticize me about these other things.
Right.
Okay. I know you're a man of discernment and judgment, and only people whose discernment and judgment matter to me can have an effect on me one way or another. If Leonard Peikoff praises me and has a good reason for doing so, I'm feeling a whole lot different than if a crowd of strangers should applaud or boo or whatever. Screw that crowd of strangers. They don't know me and they don't have any factual basis for it. But when someone I respect with a factual basis gives me a judgment, that will affect me.
Yeah. My sweet, dear departed Melissa, she used to cook. She was going to culinary school, and she was amazing at cooking. But she gave me something one time. I want to say asparagus, but I'm not sure. It might have been something else. But I absolutely detested it. And I told her, yeah, this is awful. And she got the sort of crestfallen look on her face. She looked depressed. And I said, honey, listen, you should be glad I tell you that, because you now know when I tell you this is amazing, I'm telling you the truth. You're not just getting, I'm not just feeding you bullshit. Like, there's people I know who will never criticize. So when they tell me, oh, you're doing good, how the hell do I know? I have no clue. You would say that no matter what. I don't need that. I don't need that in my life. Right. I really don't. Like, I'd rather you just not say anything. If you're going to praise me, then criticize me. I understand. Listen, I have flaws, right? I know that. And by pretending they don't exist doesn't help.
Doesn't help.
right? Just let me know and tell me. All right, Jim, we got a great question here. And I don't know if I should answer it first or if I should let you answer it first. You're liable to go on for a half hour. Maybe I should do it. Okay. The question is safer. Jenna Clem asks, what do you embrace and reject from anarcho-capitalism? Well, I'll answer this. It depends, first of all, on what variant of anarcho-capitalism that you're speaking about. And for simplicity's sake, let me just divide this into the David Friedman camp and the Murray Rothbard camp. The Murray Rothbard camp, the emphasis on individual rights, I think is very good. I also think Rothbard was an absolute genius of an economist. There's a lot of rationalism in his teaching. He tends to start at politics rather than deriving, although he does in the Ethics of Liberty sometimes veer into a broader ethical theory, which clearly he got from Ayn Rand, but he doesn't tie it in well to his overall philosophy. And amongst his followers, you see that even more, where they completely sever the individual rights theory from any broader ethical theory, especially with Hoppe, who just wants to take argumentation and use that as the foundation to start at politics. So that's the flaws with that in anarcho-capitalism. David Friedman, I find his honesty refreshing. He is an absolute genius when discussing the effects and how things could work and might work. I actually asked him, because Milton Friedman, of course, was not an anarcho-capitalist, and I asked David in person, did you ever argue with your dad about this? I was very curious. And he said, he said, it depends what you mean by argue, but sure, we talked about it. And he said, well, what the conversation would end up being is, well, you might have a point there if this, because he's very precise and technical. So, and it's all about the consequences and could something work and would something work. And David is also very honest. Like he concedes, look, there's no guarantee that under the anarcho-capitalist system that we're going to have a libertarian society. We don't know what these defense agencies and what these communities are going to turn out to be. So in short, from Friedman, I get from Rothbard, I like the individual rights emphasis, and I like the sort of, the great economic reasoning. From David Friedman, I like the honesty and the focus on consequences. What I dislike completely about anarcho-capitalism is they extrapolate from systems whereby there was always a government or always a final arbiter. They remove that final arbiter and assume that everything's going to remain the same. They assume that you can have multiple deciders over a given geographic area, that there doesn't have to be one final decider or one law enforcer over that area. And they really, I shouldn't say Friedman neglects this, but most of them really neglect that fact, the consequences of it. David will definitely examine. He thinks I'm wrong. I mean, he's told me over and over, I debated him about it. He actually walked out of a speech I was given because he said that he didn't need to hear it again. He knew what I was going to say. But he's great. I mean, he's been awesome to me. But that's my short answer, rather long-winded short answer, I should say. But just keep in mind when you think about the length of my answer, the answer that's coming up from Jim Valliant, and then judge me based on that. And Persephone, focus, for God's sake. Okay, go, Jim.
Look, well, if my dad was a Nobel Prize-winning economic historian, I think an argument with him would be in a different context. So David Friedman, I think, has a very specialized context. My dad's a Nobel Prize-winning economist who wrote a monumental
and I'll say it again,
economic history.
You and he, two toughest debaters I've ever faced.
Well,
and I've debated a lot of people. And that's, again, you're in the same league as David Friedman. That's something.
Thank you. That's quite a compliment. My short answer, and I'll try to be short about my answer, is that it is rationalism. And I want to be fair about this. Those of us who are idealists and are projecting a policy future that has never existed in history, like pure laissez-faire capitalism, are inherently in danger of rationalism. Rationalism, according to Ayn Rand, is a sort of a methodological error of dealing, and it happens with intellectuals. God, is it common for intellectuals in general, not just in politics and anarcho-capitalists, but intellectuals in general. When they deal with a world of high abstractions, they can very easily disconnect those abstractions from the facts upon which they're based. And they can live in this world of theoretical constructs and hypotheticals, and oftentimes without any recognition of the facts of reality. And so when we say that, anarchism would result in gang warfare, the essence of our argument is that force is different than other things that are marketable. It's not like chewing gum. It's not, you know what I mean? You can't chewing gum can be marketed, and we can talk about a free market in chewing gum. We can't talk about a free market in freedom. We can't talk about a free market in force. Two sides of the same conceptual coin. And so that's the part where they detach from reality and become complete rationalists. Now, we ourselves advocate things like private financing of government that has never been done before. Has never been done before. When we do that, we have to, especially there, as objectivists, we have to keep ourselves, this is advice to us who are not anarchists, we have to keep ourselves particularly grounded in the facts of reality as we're projecting a future that has never been. Because in my view, the main problem with all anarchists is this rationalism. They get inspired by the economics, free market economics, or say the morality of, read the Fountainhead. People who read the Fountainhead and Anthem thought Ayn Rand was an anarchist. Many people, after you're walking away from it, I have nothing but my will I need to respect, and she has lines like that from Anthem. Well, that means anarchism, right? No, it doesn't. They were taking it out of context. But there are people who are inspired by free market thinkers and who could end up, well, geez, if government is the problem, let's be consistent about it, logically consistent. And this is the virtue of a rationalist. They'll be consistent, logically and deductively consistent with their premises. Unfortunately, those premises have no connection to the facts of reality. They've completely disconnected from reality. They're free floating in this world of abstractions that ignore history. And so it is in precisely those moments when we're projecting a political future that has never before been enacted in reality, we have to remain acutely aware of this and very closely tied to reality. When I talk about my justification for rights, I've got all kinds of historical precedent for it. Say the war on drugs. And I'll say, geez, we have prohibition of alcohol to show you this. Or I can give you economic example after economic example in nearly everything I do. When I'm projecting a future that has never been before, such as a privately financed government, which we objectivists actually advocate, I warn my fellow objectivists, that is precisely where we run the danger of detaching our concepts from reality and developing floating abstractions. Keep your facts, keep your abstractions tied to facts. Keep your arguments tied to reality. My best advice, and that it amounts to my, in effect, implicit criticism of anarchism.
So, Jim, in my experience, the anarchist wing of the libertarians, and even many libertarians themselves, assume that a government is inherently and necessarily evil, that there can't be a good argument for any government. In my experience with a lot of objectivists, they make a similar error, in my view, and that's in not stating just how bad and evil governments have been and why the incentives are there for governments. There's almost a knee-jerk reaction against libertarianism. So I put a post up on, where the hell was it? I don't know, Facebook, I think. And I didn't put a post, I shared a post. And it was about how the government is basically an organized criminal gang. And there was immediate pushback from some from some objectivists. You can't say that. It's too libertarian. It implies that all governments are like that, when actually it doesn't. But it does accurately describe nearly every government that's ever existed, right? So you have to use history. You can't just ignore the facts. I think it's possible, because human beings have free will, to construct a rights respecting government, but we've actually never had one. I mean, we've come close. We've come close, But we haven't hit where we need to hit.
We have had, America, historically speaking, by, again, wider historical standards, is unprecedented in terms of bringing, and I would say this about the English common law before that as well. To ignore progress in that department is to ignore the potential for a just government. Sure. We have seen such dramatic improvements from divine Pharaoh absolute rule in prehistoric times to Enlightenment rights respecting governments. That is a qualitative difference of such a kind that it would be evasion, in my view, not to see that a much better government is possible. In other words, and besides, when you have minor concrete examples, the cop comes over and helps you actually defend yourself, protect your business, or arrests the guy that beat you up. They are acting justly. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of examples where the government, and those go under the radar screen for most libertarians. They completely go under the radar screen, the value that government is actually providing on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
Now, is it also becoming increasingly true that America is becoming less and less and less like a moral government and reverting back? Yes. Did we properly and fully hamstring government, even with the American Constitution? No, we did not. The Constitution is filled with all kinds of problems that led to the increasing authoritarianism, getting back to the point you were making before, increasing authoritarianism. Now, one could draw two different conclusions from that. This is inherent in government. Governments must always be authoritarian. There could be a deeper point, too. That is to say, there are people who have a morally intrinsicist view of the use of force. That is to say, force even in self-defense. Now, most libertarians, I grant you, on an individual level would say, no, you could defend yourself using force. But if I gave it to an institution, that would necessarily be an agency that would protect and now we're talking about something entirely different. No, essentially we're not. So force used in self-defense, force used in reaction to force is a good thing. Embrace, full on, good. And this affects the way many people look at war, for example. Okay, we've got to do terrible things to respond to Adolf Hitler. Okay, there are things we would not have otherwise done, that's true. But there are things that Hitler made us do that we have to do, and doing them is the moral thing. It was a wonderful historical drama about the Borgias that was made several years ago. And there's a scene in which Cardinal de la Rovere, who would eventually become Pope, is escaping Rome from the Pope, who he doesn't like. And there's a group of thugs sent by the Pope, no less, to go kill him. And the nuns he's traveling with are obviously going to get raped. They're all going to get killed. And so what does Cardinal de la Rovere do? He breaks the law of clergymen and he kills the attackers. And he says to the nuns, sometimes goodness needs a little badness to protect it. Wrong formulation. That's the government is a necessary evil. Force in self-defense is a heroic, virtuous, wonderful thing. Soldiers fighting the Nazis are heroes. Cops risking their lives to protect the safety of people in their community are heroes. Good things. Force is a good thing when applied properly. And in fact, only if it's monopolized the use of force is monopolized in a morally legitimate way, is it a really good thing?
Okay. We got a great question from Deeper with Diego, but I want to ask you this question first. And I'll give my answer after you. I don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for, Jim? Pollute the well or poison, whatever it is. Who cares?
Tip me off.
What?
Tip me off.
No.
Reveal your hand. Show your...
Okay. So, who, in your estimation, made the best argument for why objectivists should be anarcho-capitalists?
Well, I don't think there is a good argument for that.
I disagree, and we can get into a big argument here and just fill up 3 hours with it about this.
Well, I mean, I think
because no objectivist other than me, in my experience, has ever addressed the argument.
Well, that's really interesting, and that makes me interested in your answer. But there were people, there were people inspired by Ayn Rand who were anarchists, people like Roy Childs, I knew. Murray Rothbard, I knew. And they made arguments for that. Now, Roy Childs took back his argument of it in time. But in his open letter to Ayn Rand, that is precisely what he argues. He argues, Miss Rand, you're not being consistent with your own premises. And I think he's wrong. I think Ayn Rand was consistent with her premises.
Okay.
I think, in fact, you need, once you understand the nature of force, it is by nature, it is by its very essence, a monopolistic thing, and we require a monopoly of force. The only question is whether it's a morally legitimate monopoly or not, because force is the essence of monopoly.
So you actually named the guy who I think made the best argument. Now, when I say best argument, I don't think he was right, but I think it's an argument that needs to be dealt with. Leonard Peikoff dealt with it slightly in Opar, but not to the full degree. And the argument is this from Roy Childs. If the initiation of force is evil, it needs to be banned from interpersonal relationships. How then do you stop people, basically use force against them to prevent them from forming their own protection agencies in your geographic area run by the government? Because on the face of it, there does seem to be some contradiction. My answer, and I actually stole it from Robert Nozick, to be perfectly honest with you, is what is the risk principle. If an action holds a significant amount of risk, and there's no clear line here to draw, but there is the case. If it holds a significant risk or makes the protection of individual rights impossible, then you have the right to ban it. So, for instance, somebody can outlaw drunk driving. That person isn't necessarily initiating force. He put drunk driving is a good example, right? As I said it. But nevertheless, it's a significant risk that you are going to crash into somebody, maybe kill somebody and violate their rights. There's the other thing, and here's where it gets interesting, Jim, for me. Some libertarians are off their goddamn rocker and think that every asshole should have should be able to have a nuclear bomb in his basement, right? But Walter Block conceded, no, they shouldn't. So implicit in that concession, and by the way, and Stefan Kinsella, I just read something that he wrote, also concedes that point. The principle implicit is there's such a great degree of mass rights violations happening if you allow people to have nuclear weapons in their basement that you have the right to stop it. Similarly, anarcho-capitalism ultimately makes the protection of individual rights impossible. It renders them perpetually insecure. Therefore, you do have a right to stop it, especially in a case, for instance, where if you've got a group, and Leonard actually does a good job with this. He says, look, you want to organize a little defense agency with you and your pals, that's fine. You use force against the people in ours, we're prosecuting you. And that's where to me, where it ultimately comes to pass is that's fine. But if the government, that's a rights protecting government. Now that's important. It's if you have a rights protecting government, that government has the right to stop a situation where a non-rights protecting entity or something that renders rights insecure comes about. So in that case, if somebody we accuse somebody from your agency, for instance, of robbing one of our citizens, there's not going to be a dispute about where he gets tried, right? And that to me is the essence. In order to secure rights. And some people will say to me, so you would allow for initiation of force to protect the longer thing. And I really don't care how you formulate it, although I think that's wrong. The bottom line is my goal is to have rights secure. And the only way to do that is if you have a monopoly on force over a given geographic area.
Well, I think we shouldn't get confused about mens rea or the intent when a physical threat exists. We're talking about a physical threat, and it's a question of physical threat. What is physical force? Physical force is not intentionally and successfully concluding an act of force. Anytime you threaten force, you've initiated force. For example, your drunk driving example. If I were to take a gun into my backyard and just shoot in the air randomly, and someone gets shot, the neighbor gets shot when the bullet lands, I initiated force. My intention, my mental state is irrelevant. Government has a right to say, well, look, you were just taking a terrible risk. Same with drunk driving. I'm driving a bunch of metal at 70 miles an hour down the highway or something, and I'm drunk, I'm like the guy shooting off his gun in midair.
Right. Yes,
okay, that
exactly.
is an initiation. That is an initiation of force. Now, when it comes to like weapons, the threatening use of, you have a right, it seems to me, under the Second Amendment to defend yourself. You do not have a right to engage in war or overthrow the government. So if you have artillery, let's make the example easy. You got artillery, we don't even need nuclear bombs. If you just got a howitzer in your backyard, that is way more than you need to protect your family. Okay, there's never going to be there's a very, very small chance you're going to need artillery to defend you and your wife and kids. That's just not on the horizon. That is itself a threat of force. So when there's a military buildup of a foreign nation, that in itself is a threat to force, just as if there's a military buildup on my neighbor next door. That's a threat of force against me. He presses the wrong button and suddenly the whole block goes up. That is not the self-defense. And so, no, it's the way we define what initiation of force consists of, what force is. What force is. Force can amount to a threat of force. So long as it is a reasonable threat of force, it is force, and within the government's realm of protecting it. Now, you and your security agency, of course, we have bodyguards, we have security agencies. They're wonderful things. They have to be, in effect, limited in what they can do, obviously. And so I think it's one area, frankly, in which I think there is a realm for government oversight, is overseeing these security agencies, frankly, and what they're doing. What kind of weapons they use, what kind of access to information they have, what they can do when they're protecting their protectees. That is absolutely a valid function of government. And there has to be a bottom line to it. There has to, again, be a monopoly. Whoever uses force is monopolizing a situation. Monopoly is force and force is monopoly. You can't have, one without the other, my anarchist friends. And that's why all of their arguments are poor. You do not need to initiate force for a legitimate government. Full stop. Now, their best arguments are when it comes to voluntary financing, which I brought up earlier. Why? Because it's never been done before. In other words, we're out here doing something. It's not even like free banking, where we can say, well, look, the Scottish experience and the accidental experience in some states. Okay, great. We have some accidental experiences with free banking. At least we can judge free banking against, at least comparatively. With a totally voluntarily financed government, there is no empirical example. I think it could be done based on the evidence we have, but you need to use force to get your money is, in my view, the strongest argument that anarchists have.
That's a good one
because we don't have historical experience behind it.
Right. It's ahistorical.
We have enough experience to make a response to it. And I don't think that the rational response would be, well, get rid of government altogether if we can't voluntarily. Even if you could convince me that we couldn't voluntarily finance government, my reaction would not be, well, then let's become anarchists.
No. All right. So here's
that's detaching. Your abstractions are now fully detached from reality when you're thinking like that.
Persephone, why are you smiling? Okay. We're going to, now she's shaking her head like I didn't see her smiling a second ago. I saw you smiling. You can shake your head all you want. All right. So, Deeper with Diego has a question. I'm going to actually let you handle this one. He says, why is a jury filled with individuals who may not be able to identify reality properly in charge of judgment? Under capitalism, could the jury be a professional job like a lawyer or a judge?
I am skeptical of that. I think that there's a good reason why we ask for people from the street who are not judges and lawyers, people who are connected to the system, agents of the system. I would rather have the right to 12 people off the street, frankly, to decide this than a whole group of government people on the government payroll. Jury trials are evolved in English common law, mind you, over centuries. And because why? People just didn't trust, and believe me, they had to fight against it. There were royal courts like the Star Chamber that could prosecute you and kill you, execute you for treason based on hearsay, where they shift the burden of proof and they have a secret court proceeding, et cetera, et cetera. No, the reason why we have all of these procedural rights in the Bill of Rights, a right to a speedy public jury trial, a right to a jury trial, a right to have the accusation, be told of the accusations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're all designed because of a long history of government corruption. Government corruption. We need people off the streets. We need a jury of his peers in order to make this kind of evaluation. And part of it is the fact that they are not legal experts. You should not have to be a legal expert in order to discern whether this is, believe me, we have judges to make legal calls. In other words, even if everything that the defendant claims is true or the plaintiff claims is true, doesn't amount to a legal case, a judge will say, yes, even if, let's assume that the jury finds in your favor, would that amount legally? The judge will say yes or no, dismissed or not dismissed. Do a mental experiment the other way. Even if the other side, everything they say is true, would that amount to a legal case? The judge can say, okay, no, it would or wouldn't. Then when we ask the fact, did O.J. Simpson kill Nicole? And now I'm picking on him on purpose, a failure of the jury system in my view. I would rather have that risk of failure with popular opinion and prejudice and all of that sometimes affecting, and still have the protection. I'm a prosecutor. Believe me.
My God. Now,
I was a prosecutor.
When Mark's on here, I have Mark. I'm an actor. Now you're going to be on here. I'm a prosecutor.
I'm a prosecutor. I don't know. But for over 17 years, I was a prosecutor. And boy, if you said to me at some points, boy, wouldn't it be easier to do your job if all you had to do is persuade a judge? Yeah. And sometimes defendants did waive their right to a jury. Wow. Okay. For me, that was always a much easier. Oh, now I'm rolling downhill. I've only got a judge to persuade, and I know the way that judge thinks. Boom. 1 + 1 = 2. It makes a prosecutor's life a whole lot easier, but I want prosecutors' lives to be difficult, and I want cops to be skeptically looked at.
Let's isolate that for a quote. Jim Valliant saying, I want prosecutors' lives to be difficult.
Yeah, and I want cops to have to be on their toes and be cross-examined. As you pointed out, they lie enough as it is. The point is, I want them to be cross-examined by the defense attorney, and I want a bunch of skeptical people from the community listening to the cross-examination of that cop, just to protect our liberties. Now, I'm a big advocate of jury trials.
So am I. And, even if the argument is, well, the law is very complex, they can't, the jury can't understand all the laws. If that's the case, the laws are too complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
If it's a non-objective law or a law too Byzantine and complex that you need, to call in 6 different law professors who will give you 6 different opinions on it, well, then that tells me that the law is non-objective. The law's got to go. The law is taking on too much. Anyone walking into the court should understand when something is a crime and something isn't a crime. If it can't be obvious to a jury, then how can it be fair to the ordinary person out there trying to know what's legal and not legal?
Yeah, Diego. Yes, Diego says, to be fair, I just say professional in the sense of private. The juries would just be like private lawyers, not a wing of the government, if that makes sense. I still don't like the idea of juries like for hire, I guess, in that way.
Well, grand juries.
I think a random selection from the population is best. That's my personal take.
Well, let me give you an example. Grand jury, there's 2 kinds of juries. Grand juries that accuse people and indict them of felonies, and there are petit juries that come to the ultimate factual decision in individual cases. Federal grand juries will sometimes be impaneled for a whole year.
Did you just come in with petit juries? Did you really just use that?
I did.
Last time you were here, what'd you say? Gratis dicta. You brought us last time.
Oh my God. I'm sorry to be talking in these legal terms. The jury
in Latin.
Yes.
I don't know. Is petit Latin? Is that from Latin?
Well, it actually comes from Old French, but I'm not going to go petit. No.
Old French is what kind of language?
Old French is sort of a dead language, but it's the mother of modern French.
But it's a Romance language.
It's a Romance language, and
which comes from what? Where do Romance languages come from?
Rome. They're all forms of Latin.
Yeah. So you try to make me look dumb in front of everybody. You see that I'm getting all the attention because of how I look with my shirt on.
Well, exactly. In your state of undress, you're obviously feeling you're distracting all the female eyes, at least. And so, yeah.
In the male eyes, listen, I'm not. So there's no problem with looking.
Well,
I'm not looking at the males. I'm saying if they want to look at me, I don't have an issue with it.
Well, you were talking about my wife. My wife is absolutely convinced that males, females, creatures of all species are somehow attracted to me. So I have to trust you because everyone's going to throw themselves at you. That's how much you love it.
I promise. You can assure Holly I will not do so.
You will not.
At least not if I'm sober.
Assure her that there are many people like that out there, and it never really sinks. In any case, sorry for the fancy language, but grand juries which accuse people of crimes, that set a process that will end up with a jury trial, that's a separate jury, the jury that does the ultimate deciding in each individual case. There's such a thing called a grand jury, I'm sure everyone's familiar with. They formally accuse people of serious crimes. Those juries can hear thousands of cases, dozens at least, cases through the course of a year, because they're a sitting grand jury, and their job is simply to see if there's enough evidence to proceed to a felony trial. So they can hear lots and lots of cases over a period of a year. Maybe, grand juries can be impaneled to hear many cases over a long period of time. In that sense, we kind of have professional juries. Now, they'll meet like once a week, like Friday will be the federal grand jury day, that the grand juries will all get together, and sometimes they'll need them for other days. Can you come in on Thursday? And that imposes a huge burden on these people who have jobs and going to school and have lives and kids, and yet we haul them in over the course of a whole year to listen to dozens of different cases to see if the prosecution has enough evidence at least to formally charge someone. That's the closest we come to a professional jury, and they're underpaid, they're overworked, and I think it is an onerous job as it is. But I'm all in favor of both kinds of juries. Before the government can even proceed with a serious charge, a felony, something that can cause prison time, eliminate your right to vote or possess a gun, or all the other negative consequences states can impose when you commit a felony, to accuse someone, there have to be procedural safeguards. And I frankly like the grand jury. Now,
and states don't have to have a grand jury, though, right? States can just have probable cause hearings, right?
Well, states can do what they call preliminary hearings within 10 court in California. Within 10 court days of your arrest, we have to end charge. We have to give you a public. Now, the grand jury has lower rights than a preliminary hearing. A grand jury the other side isn't even there. The other lawyer isn't there. It's an ex parte. It's called, I use some fancy Latin again. Don't mean to intimidate. Ex parte means that only one side is there at all. The defense is not there in a grand jury, and the grand jury's secret. No one can find out what's going on. In a preliminary hearing, a probable cause hearing, like the guy who in Utah shot Charlie Kirk, he's getting a preliminary hearing. Now, the defense is asked to put that off so they can get all the discovery and so forth. But it's going to be a public hearing. The defendant's lawyer can cross-examine the evidence. There's got to see, so there's a lot more protections in a preliminary hearing that many states have, but California, the prosecutor has an option. He can summon a grand jury, or he can go by preliminary hearing, and I think that's perfectly okay, so long as there are more rights involved in the preliminary hearing. It's even better protection for a defendant than a grand jury indictment. Grand juries can operate in secret. The other side isn't there. Do you think that a bunch of prosecutors can manipulate a grand jury a whole lot easier when they're operating in secret and there's no defense attorney to contend with? Yeah.
I do. You never had an ex parte meeting with the judge during trials, I hope.
Not during trial, but there are moments when you have to do it. Well, for example, I get a search warrant before any charge has been made. Isn't that an ex parte proceeding? I go in, and we the hell don't tell the guy or his lawyer that we're about to search him, we're going to arrest him. So all, for example, search warrants are in effect ex parte proceedings, where the prosecutor asks the judge on behalf of a law enforcement agency for a court order to go search or arrest somebody. But of course,
when you said they're the decider, Jim, it reminds me, do you remember George W. Bush, when everybody thought, they were saying basically that he's just a puppet for Cheney, and he said, I'm the decider.
I'm the decider. I decide. Well, George Bush had the opposite problem of Trump, didn't he?
Jim, you have been so wonderful today. We didn't get to any of the stories. We got none of the stories. So I had you read a bunch of articles, it turns out, for nothing but your own edification.
Well, it was certainly edifying. Well, I'm surprised that you didn't. You send me the news roundup with all the stories that you usually send when Mark or I appear. Okay, I was disappointed. There was no Diddy sentencing. I mean,
I didn't even
what
see
Diddy did, and now Diddy's going to do what Diddy does when the judge does to Diddy what the judge does to Diddy.
Oh my God, Jim. I can't, that was too much. It was great. Yeah, that was weird. Persephone's talking about Trump's weird AI Grim Reaper video. I don't know if you saw that, but that was weird. It's all weird. Everything's just weird now.
And the government shuts down, so mariachi music. So, yeah, I mean, that's unserious. Now, I don't mind joking around, and politicians certainly should, like every other profession, be free to joke around about things. And I don't particularly. And again, the other thing that you didn't bring up in the news roundup was the government shutdown.
All right, of course. Go ahead, Jim. But we got a question.
I mean, but when the government shuts down, in my own mind, mariachi music is playing. You know, no, there's negatives to the government not doing its job too. But you know, the idea of their government shutting down and not having the resources it needs does fill me with a little warm fuzzy, because we always get to learn how much more government we have than we need every time the government shuts down.
Yes, that's true. Jim, what are the name of the shirts? They sell them all over Old Town. They're Mexican. Ponchos. Diana would not let me buy a poncho. I wanted.
If you can't have a poncho, you can't do the Clint Eastwood look.
But I will rock a poncho and a sombrero. I don't care.
Poncho, man.
But Lee has a question. She says, "Hi, Jim Valliant."
Hi, Lee.
You could just say hi, Jim. You don't have to go all out Valiant. She says, "Hi, Jim Valliant. I like your shirt." As a lawyer, how do you feel about Legally Blonde? Personally, I think it's a cinematic masterpiece.
It's a cinematic masterpiece where a lawyer might get picky about what's going on through the course of the movie. And I'll leave it right there because it's a charming movie, and I think movies can do that. Movies can step away from realism. I'm not looking for the ordinary. I'm not looking for my law school experience.
You've seen this movie?
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but
that's not an excuse.
No, but it's a charming premise.
Here we go. A charming premise.
There are all kinds of charming premises that are unrealistic. But I mean, this has been true about movies. Let me just make a statement about movies, about law in general. Even serious ones, that Henry Fonda movie, 12 Angry Men.
Oh, what a great movie.
Okay, it is a great movie. It is filled with jury misconduct. If I as a prosecutor learned about half of what was going on in that jury room, I would be demanding that the judge declare a mistrial and start all over.
Doesn't mean it's unrealistic.
Well, no, it doesn't mean, not necessarily unrealistic. But in my experience talking, as I have with hundreds and hundreds of juries after they've done their work, it did strike me as both jury misconduct, legally unrealistic, factually unrealistic, and yet it made it a super movie.
How about, Jim, in trials? This is like my favorite thing. When someone says or does something they're not supposed to do and the judge instructs the jury, you're not to consider that. What? No, you've just presented unequivocal evidence the guy shot the other guy, but I'm not going to consider that. Come on.
Oh, I have many stories along that line. Well, now, if it's bad enough, say, for example, if I commit, I was about to use another technical. If I commit what's called Griffin error as a prosecutor, and I refer
that's not technical at all.
What
was the technical word you were going to use?
Well, but there was a time before Griffin when a prosecutor could say, "Hey, why didn't the defendant take the stand if he's so innocent?"
Yeah, and I don't want you committing any Bivens violations either.
But the point is, if the error is so bad that you really can't unring the bell, and there is a standard in law where, the judge can try to unring the bell that the jury just heard, but there also comes a point where, no, we need a new trial. Sorry,
it's
go home, start again.
My favorite. I can tell you
how many mistrials have I observed?
I don't know, but I'm going to tell you something. The favorite word or the favorite phrase of appeal courts: harmless error. Harmless error. Everything's harmless.
That is, and very often they'll find error and find it to be harmless. But also very often the judge will say it's mandatory, and the appellate courts will say, no, that was a mandatory mistrial. And I just gave one example of what are dozens of examples of tripwires that can cause a trial to short circuit right then and there. Now, have I Do I agree with you about that? Yeah. There was one time the defense called a witness, for example, and they didn't know it, but their own witness accused the defendant of trying to kill him. And you could see the surprise on the look of the defense attorney's eyes, the judge's eyes. The jury was completely taken aback. I got to cross-examine. Oh, so you're saying that this guy over here tried to kill you? And, well, you were the one, defense were the one who... So then the defense stands up and says, Judge, I want you to strike the evidence from the record and admonish the jury. And that's exactly what the judge did. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you act like you never heard that this defendant tried to commit this crazy attack on this other occasion. But guess what? You're absolutely right. That's exactly how it came out. It was appealed, and the District Court of Appeals in California said that was not error even. They said that was sufficient to cure the problem. Knowing what the issue on appeal would be, I submitted. The judge said, absolutely, Judge, strike it from the record, tell the jury to ignore it. Knowing in my heart, the jury's never going to unhear that. You can't unhear that when the witness, the defense's own witness, accuses the defendant of doing some crazy violent act. No, yes, Judge, do strike that. Because on appeal, the stricken from the record and that admonition by the judge has a greater impact than it really does or ought to. I agree with you there.
Jim, I have just gotten a comment from Lee Timothy Frazier that says, Jim, I'm never going to get this out of my head now. She says, Jim is so Pixar character.
I don't know quite how to take that.
That's great. Lee loves you. You're like her favorite.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. I don't know whether I'm an animated toy or...
You are my animated Jim. And as such, you are going to give the capitalist thought of the day. I'll ask the questions. And we have to make a rule. From now on, I cannot dress like this because Persephone gets nothing done.
Completely distracting.
Yeah, totally. It's
although, my friends, this guy's got the coolest tat I've ever seen. And any opportunity, y'all have to see that tat. You are observing one of the coolest tat, maybe the coolest tat of all time ever. So, the capitalist thought of the day. Well, how to integrate this day? Capitalism has never existed. We've always had some kind of compromise to capitalism. Even in the heyday of the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution and much of the 19th century, there were contradictions to it, whether it was taxation, for time, slavery, both in Britain and the United States, the British Empire for sure, and the United States, even after the Enlightenment. Capitalism in its pure, unregulated form has never existed. That is, it is an abstract projection of what ought to be and could be. And I use the phrase from aesthetics on purpose because it is not what has been, but what ought to be and can be. And what anarchists miss is the can be part. That is to say, they do not think through what the actual reality, the factual consequences would be. But we are projecting a reality that has never existed before. And so when people come along and tell you that our system, especially our system over the last 100 years, which has certainly become nothing recognizably capitalist as it once was, do not confuse this mixed economy. And leftists will call anything they don't like capitalism. They'll call an authoritarian state and, some primitive tribal state a capitalism. Anything they don't like is capitalism. Today, it's capitalism, whatever they don't like in America. When America is certainly not a capitalist place anymore. But the fact that we are fighting for what Ayn Rand called an unknown ideal must be borne in mind. And anyone who projects a future state that has not yet been in reality has to understand just exactly that. And it demands that we attend to the facts, that we not ignore history, that we not ignore economics, that we keep our concepts grounded in reality, and we project what is a reality-based future, not one that asks people to make assumptions like anarchists do. assumptions about human nature that really aren't true or have never been tested. So don't be a rationalist, folks. Correct approach to reason is a necessary condition for us to win the day and to argue for a system, a better system, a human system that is both possible and moral, correctly moral and consistently moral. So that'll be it's a complex, convoluted capitalist thought of the day.
No, it was not, Jim. You don't diminish it. Don't do that. That was freaking fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So the question that we have is, it's going to be a fun one for over the weekend. Have you seen the movie Legally Blonde? And if so, how do you rate it? So remember to go to our YouTube station. That's the question. Answer the question. Also make whatever other comments you want. Have you seen Legally Blonde? If so, how do you rate it? And remember, like, share, subscribe, go to the American Capitalist Party website at americancapitalistparty.org. Do it all. Be a good capitalist. And remember to tune in Monday. Until then, check your premises. Peace.